No way am I doing that.
All right. Again, as I said, I'm Lieutenant Commander Lauren Crone. I'm the chaplain. I've been the facilitator for this ethics across the curriculum in the yard this week. We've had 10 participants throughout the week who come together to learn to teach leadership and ethics here at the Stockdale Center and LEL. And they've taken what they've learned and they've integrated into a capstone project, which is what we're going to present to you today on how we're going to sync the ethics and moral development of our midshipmen across the yard. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. McCrease to give you a little bit more about our learning outcomes and information about the program.
Great, thanks very much, Commander. Appreciate it. I'm Jeff McCrease. I'm the Deputy Director of the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership. First off, thanks for investing some time to talk about how the Stockdale Center is working with the Center for Teaching and Learning and other entities across the yard, including the Leadership Education Development Division. Our intent to bring people from all across the yard together is fivefold here, and these are the learning outcomes that have defined what we've done this past week. Number one, to comprehend the basic principles and sequence of the key leadership themes from our Naval Academy courses. Each midshipman gets one leadership course every year during their 4 years here. Number two, comprehend the basic principles of moral reasoning as taught in our NE 203, our moral reasoning course. Number three, construct effective learning outcomes related to ethical content in a course, discipline, sport, or other activity. Number four, develop curriculum content that integrates ethics into a course, discipline, sport, or other activity. And then finally, number five, collaborate with key influencers across different disciplines to confront the shared challenges of incorporating ethical issues into a course, academic curriculum, discipline, sport, or other activity. A little bit of background. This is the third evolution of this. The idea started about 3.5 years ago when Allison Webster Giddings, myself, some other folks from Teaching and Learning, Dr. Karen Sproles is here, got together and asked ourselves, how is it that we can take one course, our NE 203 ethics course, and turn it into an opportunity for us to inject ethics in every course across the yard, in every sporting activity we do, in every company across the yard as well. And this is what has come from it. This workshop here has met for 5 days. This is the fifth of the days. On Monday, we got together for a brief introduction to share our project ideas and get to know each other. We also did a broad overview of our 4 leadership courses as they're taught through the 4 years here. We've also talked a little bit about the accreditation process and how important assessment of student learning and student development is. On day 2, on Tuesday, we spent about 3 hours or so talking about what is taught in our NE 203 ethics course with a deep dive into our moral deliberation roadmap. We also had some alumni come back to talk about what they have learned and how they've applied their work in previous years. On Wednesday, we did an equally deep dive into the process of constructing effective learning outcomes. The academics of the yard probably know this very well. The people from Bancroft Hall and the coaching staff, maybe not so much. And so we wanted to help our non-academics particularly understand the 3 domains of learning, the cognitive, affective, and behavioral, and how we very carefully and specifically choose what it is we're trying to teach people and how we assess that. And then finally, on Thursday yesterday was a self-help day and a work day for our participants to meet with the subject matter experts from around the yard to work on their projects. And finally here today is our day of presentation. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you in cyberspace. Commander Crone, back to you.
Yeah. Up first, I'd like to invite Professor Fujimura and Professor Zimmerman, who will give their first presentation. Thank you for volunteering.
All right, good morning. Our presentation is called Ethics in Cyber Ethnography, with cyber ethnography anthropology, intercultural communication, and area studies. I'm Erica Zimmerman, and I teach in languages and cultures, specifically Japanese, but also intercultural communication, cyberculture, and various other things too.
And I'm Clementine Fujimura, also a professor in languages and cultures. And together, actually, we are also leading the new area studies major. You didn't say that. And I teach Russian, German, anthropology, intercultural communication, and cyber ethnography rotationally.
So this project integrates cross-cultural moral complexities into lectures and courses involving human subject research, which is at the heart of our research, but also what we want to have midshipmen do. And it will be included in a chapter in a book that we're working on called Ethics in Cyber Ethnography. And the book is looking at cyber ethnography and leadership.
So just to begin, our new area studies major is sort of focuses on many different courses that all bring together the intersection of ethnography and ethics. And so it all begins with this class called Foundations in Area Studies, FL210. And so let's start with just that class and make sure that we have this ethics, this intersection really understood and incorporated and internalized by the students. So at the end of this Foundations class, we hope that the students will be able to explain the American Anthropological Code of Ethics, as well as the IRB process. We also want them to be able to, they will be able to analyze moral complexities involved in ethnographic research to include cultural perspectives and influences. That is, not only their perspectives that they bring into their research, but the perspectives of the people that they are studying. And so finally, we want them to implement the code, the conduct, to implement and conduct culturally defined ethical ethnographic research themselves. That is to actually develop their own project where they demonstrate that they can do all these things. Oh, and then that's my slide too. So, all right, and then finally, so in order to do this, I have an agenda. I will need to integrate into the syllabus these learning outcomes. We have always brought in ethics, let me just say, into ethnographic research, but it's something that is mentioned. But now I'd really like to, thanks to this workshop, I think I'm ready to really make this a big component. And then I'd like to integrate the ethics into all of their journal reports so that I can actually see what they are taking in and how they are learning, because we do a lot of journaling in my classes. And in order to see that we've really done what we wanted to do, I'm going to develop a rubric to assess the final project, both the written and the oral presentations. And I want the students to also give me their feedback. And so I'm going to develop a rubric for them to self-assess how ethics and ethnography have come together for them.
So the timeline and assessment, so during the summer and also in the fall, we're going to be gathering materials on moral philosophy. We're also going to be looking at finalizing the syllabus for FL210, our foundations course. And that will include also looking at creating some new lectures, looking at the readings, looking at first guest speakers for the ethics component. And then, of course, we have to design the journal report assignments and design those two assessment rubrics, and then, of course, conduct the assessment at the end of the semester. So the next steps are going to involve improving the ethics component for other syllabi. So we not only do we teach this foundations course, but we also have intercultural competence, culture anthropology, and our cyberculture courses. And so that's really what we want to expand this across our curriculum and have it be a component in all of those. As she said, we do teach the ethics, of doing human subject research, but we really want to expand this and use the terminology that we learned here in this workshop. And then, of course, we have revised the FL210 materials, and we're working on writing a chapter for our textbook, which is going to look at cyber ethnography. So for those of you who don't know, ethnography is the systematic and qualitative study of culture and communication in using participant observation. And then cyber ethnography is an extension of that. So we're looking at, in the cyber domain, how we interact with online communities, identity formation, and things like. So that's kind of where we're going with this. We're both ethnographers. I do also communication, comprehension analysis, but both of us have used ethnography in our research, and we want to expand on that in the cyber domain. And then finally, we're hoping to present next year at the Center for Teaching and Learning Conference, and then also in our respective fields in anthropology and cyberculture. Thank you.
We've decided that if you have burning questions, you really to save them to the end, or you can take them offline on the presentation.
Okay.
Next up, we have Professor Taylor from our computer science.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. So first off, I wanted to thank the lead division and the Stockdale Center for putting this together. This has been a really applicable workshop that I think was really helpful and really great. So I just wanted to thank you all for that. So as you said, my name's Gavin Taylor. I'm in the Department of Computer Science, and I'm heavily involved in the development of the new data science material at the Naval Academy. Now, data science is not a brand new field, but it is an especially powerful and poorly understood field. And so what that means is that there are maybe special risks of ethical misbehavior and negative societal impacts if we're not careful. And so throughout this curriculum, both within our existing classes and within the new major that we're putting together, we have had and want to have an ethical education be a key part of it. This particular project is a piece of the the machine learning and data science elective that we teach to computer science majors as part of their AI and data science track. So these are midshipmen who have chosen to commit their electives to artificial intelligence. And so this is expanding something that I've always done. And so in the past, what I've done in this class is we had some read-aheads. So we read some case studies, and then we had a discussion in class. This discussion was interesting, and the midshipmen liked it, but it wasn't accessible, and it wasn't leveraging the ethical education that they had received elsewhere on the earth. And so the dangers there are, first off, it was probably not as effective as it could have been. And second of all, when you're not assessing it, you worry about giving the impression that this is an ancillary topic, right? This is not a core topic. This is something else that we talk about. And so my goal here is to develop this into a full unit that leverages that material better. So my learning outcomes are, I want them to understand the effect of machine learning tools on privacy. I want them to be able to explain how human bias or data bias appears in machine learning tools and techniques to mitigate it. So it's still a technical course, so that, and here's how you can go about fixing it, is an important part of it. I want them to be able to recognize when machine learning might repress minority perspectives or minority access or disabled access. And then finally, I want them to be able to debate societal and regulatory solutions to avoid these negative outcomes that might come out of machine learning and data science. And so what I'm changing my informal classroom discussion into is a full week-long unit. So the class each week has 2 lectures and then a 2-hour lab, where normally I talk for those first 2 hours, and then in the lab I introduce a project that they start working on that will be due a week later. And so for this week, what I'm going to do is before each lecture, I'm going to provide them some of these same read-aheads that we've used in the past. And then in class, I'll introduce some technical background to help tie the readings from New York Times or what have you back to the technical material that they've learned, and introduce some really well-formed ethical dilemmas from them. And then in pairs, I want them to follow the ethical framework that they're familiar with from NE 203, so I won't have to introduce that, and they'll have worked through it in the past already, and they'll be comfortable with that, so they can use that framework to debate these ethical issues, and then bring the class back together to discuss these dilemmas as a whole, along with how is it that we feel like we should go about solving these problems. And then in the lab, the project is going to be a paper. We don't do a lot of this in computer science, right? In fact, a lot of them say, why did when you ask them, why did you sign up for computer science? One of the answers is, I don't want to write papers. But I do want them to, because I'm asking them to engage with some of these higher order learning issues, I want them to have to write out some of their opinions about these things and perform some of this analysis. And so I have a ... something in there, because I haven't quite worked out what the prompt will be. But they'll have a week to work on a paper in which they discuss some of these things and reflect on how their viewpoint of some of these tools has changed as a result of our discussion. And so I'm going to, so the timeline, first off, this class is being offered in the next semester. So I've got a class full of students that are going to see this for the first time. I'm going to first off assess this project by assessing the students, right? So the ethics analysis, I'll be grading the paper with a rubric that I'm going to have to work very hard to put together. I've never done that before. I'm going to assess the technical mitigation approaches through the exam. So all that material is now going to be testable and is going to be reinforced as well. And then I'm going to assess myself, because the thing that I view as hard is putting together a clear-cut set of goals, both for class and for the paper. And that's not quite my natural habitat. And so I'm going to ask the students to provide me with some feedback on how clear was this? Did you understand what it was you wanted to do? Did you find it useful? I found a lot of luck with student feedback that way. So that's going to be a key part of this. And so my next steps, my work before that comes around next semester is, first off, I want to take these conversations that we've always had in class and turn them into very clear-cut ethical dilemmas in order to be debated. I need to compose this paper prompt and the grading rubric with the help of all sorts of other people who have been in this workshop who know better how to do that. So I've gotten a lot of help there. And then finally, normally we don't count on our electives in the computer science department being a key part of our accreditation because not all the students take those classes, right? So it makes things much more complicated. But that is a conversation that I want to have with our departmental assessment committee about, we're required to teach ethics. Here's a lot of ethics. How is it that we can make this tie into the things we're doing? That's the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Taylor. Now we have our Deputy Commandant, Captain Foreman.
Good morning, everybody. I also wanted to say thank you for everybody that helped in this course. Most of my days are spent with tactical fires, put this fire on that fire. I'll be able to come here and maybe build something has been quite refreshing, expanded my thinking. I'm all about integration for the midshipmen, and this has helped with that understanding what they're learning in the classroom as we try to apply it to a piece of what I do for the brigade and for the commandant is execute the administrative conduct system. So when a midshipman behavior is not in accordance with our desires per midshipman regulations, how do we go about shaping that and holding them accountable? The problem is that we're outnumbered, the active duty chain, both the senior enlisted leaders, company officers, all the way up to the commandant and I, to correct that. So we really need to make some strides and some improvements in peer accountability. Last set of strappers, I asked that question a lot, and the answers for the number of times that the top performing midshipmen had held their peers accountable was extremely low. So I think I've covered all of that, and I think a part of that is, as we apply this ethics construct, is a lot of midshipmen have just separated misconduct and observing misconduct and not acting on it, totally divorced from good character and honor. And you would ask them, are you an honorable midshipman? Do you have good character? Yes, absolutely. Have you seen misconduct and not reported it? Yes. Do you see a disconnect there? No, absolutely not. And I'm trying to bridge that gap. So learning outcomes, our classroom is a little different. You could argue that the commandant and I have about 4,400 students like all at once, a distributed classroom in various ways. Some of it is alumni hall, some of it is King Hall, some of it is company area wardrooms. So that's how I approached this teaching and curriculum, if you will. So our learning outcomes first, starting with the affective category, where they just need to have this realization of closing the gap that I discussed, that I see misconduct, I know there's a standard. By me observing it, that now I am now part of this problem if I do nothing about it. So that's step one, and to be able to teach that they will be able to relate the moral deliberation roadmap to observe misconduct, which is something that I think a lot of midshipmen are not doing right now. Cognitively, I want to give them the tools to respond once they have that realization, like, oh, I need to do something. I've entered this decision space. What is my menu of options? So that's a cognitive recognition that I'll give them some tools to do that. Speaking with those 5 actions, starts with a quick verbal, hey, shipmate, you can't do that. Let's do better. To I'm going to put you into the conduct system. But there's a lot on the way to that, depending on the nature of the misconduct that you observe. And that they have choices, and I need to let them know that they have choices. At the end of the day, that's what I want them to act I take imperfect action, but something as opposed to nothing at all. And then lastly, behaviorally, we say what right looks like, and we want to show them that. So I've started a tool. I refer to it down here. It's just an acronym to help me remember. HELP, H being a high energy engagement, really, really positive, super excited about being in the Navy. Hey, let's just raise our standards, everybody. L is the lawyer like, just keep asking questions, and they're going to walk themselves into the decision that, well, I do need to do something here. You've made it very clear to me. And the P is the parental approach. I really love you. I'm really proud of you. Y'all have potential, but this is really disappointing. And that kind of guilt trip. So that's the learning outcome, and we're going to go about it in the times I have to talk to them, our classroom. We do have reform coming up in August. Hopefully that will be our first touch. That I need to illustrate the conduct and acting when you observe misconduct is character, and clearly apply more of an academic sense, the moral deliberation roadmap, to observe misconduct, and then actually take a case study that, hey, midshipmen saw this. For those of you that have already been taught this in leadership, some of you will get it later if you're fourth class and so on. But very clear, this is how it applies. Do you see how what you learned in the classroom applies to what you see in Bancroft Hall and applies to what you see in the bar in downtown Annapolis when you see Wisconsin? The other options that we have with the squad leader, so we're going to have a first time squad leader training separate for all the incoming squad leaders, platoon commanders, company commanders. We're going to give them a notebook, and we're going to have some training sessions. So they'll have the tools, hard copy, when they leave that training, so that they can refer to it, and hopefully it will stay fresh. And then having a continuing discussion using conduct cases. We used to just say, hey, this just happened. Midshipmen did this, and they were awarded this punishment, so they have a flavor of what's going on. But now we can actually apply in that case study that they have to discuss, maybe one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks, at squad tables with a couple of shipmates next to each other. They'll apply that moral deliberation roadmap to a recent case and keep that process fresh. Where all the assessment will hopefully come on the December timeframe as we go through the semester. A lot of surveys to see what midshipmen self-reporting on how they view the conduct system, how many corrections have they made of classmates, hopefully from 0 to a few, and using the different scaled approaches that we've given them. We will have some data on historical cases, so we'll be able to tell is that going up or down, and so on. And then we can also just actually some discussion that we used to take quizzes on mid-regs and the conduct system and actually check a cognitive level of knowledge. Do you know what the rules say? Do you know what your options are? And then at the end, the squad leaders can ask their squad, back to what I said just about survey and self-reporting, have you actually changed your behavior, and are you correcting other people? And they'll know about whether or not, yeah, nobody used to say anything to me, and now I was corrected 3 times this semester. So both the giving and the receiving data through the squad leaders there. Next steps, this is just a slide right now and a good idea in my head. So my modus operandi is to talk to the COs and SCLs, get their feedback. I'll need them to be on board, as well as the midshipman leadership, give them time to talk, at least down to the company commanders and say, hey, this is coming, what do you guys think? And they know that it's pre-decisional so that their input will count. We'll get everything scheduled. We have some revisions of the conduct manual all set to go that we'll be working on third block this summer. And just really make my slides, get the data into the handbook, and then make the video. I do have some midshipman point of contacts that enjoy that, and I think they'd be excited about this kind of project. So that is my plan, and we'll see how it goes.
Thank you, good, Bob. Next up, we have Professor Cowell.
Good morning, everybody. And again, I'm going to copy everybody else and say thank you. This workshop's been a really, really great experience. And I am, I guess, a lone engineer in the workshop this time around. So I teach in the mechanical engineering department. I'm calling my project Making Connections because I would like them to connect some of the things we're already doing with ethics to what they're doing in NE203, like many of the other participants here. So this project will actually help my department with assessment and accreditation. ABET is the accreditation body for the engineering programs. And there is actually an ABET student outcome that addresses ethics specifically. And paraphrasing, we want our engineers to make judgments which consider the impact of their solutions in global, economic, environmental, and societal contexts. So ethics is there. And we do present it in their capstone. I believe it's the only place where we really sort of formally address it. What I'd like to do is pull in the American Society of Mechanical Engineers canons and ethics, which is what we use in their capstone, and connect it with what they've already covered. So like many in the workshop, I've learned the language, I've seen the framework, and I want to, have that ring a bell with our engineers when they hear about ethics in our curriculum. So I developed some learning outcomes, and the first thing I'd like them to do, as I mentioned, is to connect what they're covering, their professional code of ethics, with the attributes of an officer, and that's just a general statement. The idea is to have them internalize these ethics, perhaps that will help them think of themselves and identify themselves as engineers. Again, that would help us with the second learning outcome, which is to internalize the importance of recognizing ethical considerations right out of the gate. So I learned a little bit about increasing moral perception and the idea that they think about ethics as one of their engineering constraints, not just, what is the limit in the weight of my structure? What is, these other functions? Let's pull ethics into it up front. And then finally, the tools that they have for making decisions, can we incorporate those into their engineering decisions? So the plan to do this is pretty simple, just small group work where they do an exercise where they, work with these codes and canons and just correlate them with the characters and virtues of a naval officer. And they can certainly begin with the graduate attributes, which is a great list, but not necessarily limiting them to that. And then here's the hard one. The hard one is our courses are generally packed, so it's very hard for us to create something brand new, and I have to get buy-in from my department. But I'd like to take what we already do. So in 313 is material science, in 217 is the structures course. Can we take the exercises we do, which very often involve trade-offs, such as, say, safety versus efficiency, say, and sort of try to convince them that those are the moral dilemmas. And perhaps I can set up some constraints or some scenarios where there's more of an ethics consideration involved, and just have them work through that using the moral deliberation roadmap. There are models for design that are very much like roadmaps with weighting factors and things like that. But can I bring that in and make them think of the ethics a little bit more along the way? An example might be a bridge, and they know how to size a ligament in a bridge, perhaps during a fatigue analysis. They can do that process. I'll have them miss the mark. Maybe the safety factor is less than 1. But then also bring in ethical considerations for what's going to happen when we close down this bridge, which is also a very real life scenario these days. So pull it into what we already do. So I'm teaching material science in the fall, and it's of course has a little more flexibility. So I'd like to come up with something and just run it as a pilot so that I can talk about it later. Assessment again is simple, maybe a benchmark question before and after. I've had some good advice on language for that question that helps me assess things like internalizing, which I'm not used to assessing those qualities. So I'd like to develop that question and perhaps use it again after they're through our program and after their capstone. And then finally, just the next steps. I have to, again, get my faculty buy-in. I'd like to go to a department meeting and just tell them about my experiences here. And later on, perhaps tell them about the pilot experience. And then meet with course directors directly. They know what's in their courses. I think the most effective way would be for us to kind of sprinkle it through. So add it to what we're already doing. Make sure we're aware. We have the moral perception to think about those ethics issues as we develop our exercises and how to work through. And then a place that we adjust ethics is within the capstone. But again, just to make sure that we're looking at the projects and getting the students to look at it through an ethics lens right from the beginning of their design. That's a place where they really start from the ground up. And we'd like them to actually use and think about ethics right at the beginning. So that's my project in the nutshell.
Next up, we have Senior Chief, our Chief Born and Senior Chief at Soma.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and continued thanks for this opportunity, this honor and privilege to be part of this workshop this week. I am Senior Chief Lampasona, working in Bancroft Hall as Ninth Company Senior Enlisted Lead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chief Bourne, Chief Lois Bourne. I work in 16th Company at SE.
So we'd like to present to you, we're excited to present to you a project that we've been working on. Oftentimes, when I'm having corrective conversations with midshipmen, they tend to try and justify their actions by saying things like, well, it's kind of hard for me to do the right thing, Senior Chief, when most of my upperclassmen are doing the wrong thing. Now, we all know this does not rationalize their actions. We also know that even after a corrective conversation like this, the chances that they will repeat the same infraction is unfortunately probable. Midshipmen have also expressed to me that in times when they have tried to correct their peers or encourage them to do the right thing, they've been ridiculed and ostracized. This was deeply concerning to me, and in my frustration of correcting dozens of midshipmen daily on the same repetitive infractions, I asked myself, how do we begin to change the culture or create a climate where doing the right thing and being squared away is actually cool?
Okay, so what we're going to do instead of, I don't know if you know, instead of using our quad chart, we wanted to speak a little more in detail about both of our programs. So the first program that I'm going to speak about is the USNA Pride program. And when we say pride, we mean that in a literal sense. We want the midshipmen to take pride in every aspect of their lives, whether it's in Bancroft Hall, in the classroom, in sports, and of course, outside of Bancroft Hall, when they're on liberty. Pride also stands for professionalism, respect, integrity, discipline, and excellence. We want to get the buy-in from the other COs and SDLs, and of course our chain of command, to hand select some of the best midshipmen to provide facilitated conversation with their peers on a daily or a weekly basis. We're more thinking of around the time of our NMT training that we give on a weekly basis. And what that's going to include is either a list of virtue scenarios or topics that they can speak about, things that they've seen around the yard that can kind of shift the behavior that we see here in Bancroft Hall. So we're hoping at the conclusion of the Pride program, we can shift the culture of what we see in the halls so that our midshipmen can be committed to embodying our core values in our Navy ethos.
The other project that we'd like to talk about is called our self-treat course, our USNA self-treat course. Now, this one is special to me. Where I grew up in New York, you had to be aggressive or you didn't survive. Now, as a junior sailor, just starting out in the Navy, that aggressive nature got me in a lot of trouble and almost ended my career. If it wasn't for a couple of chiefs that kind of strong-armed me, pulled me in, mentored me, gave me some guidance and instruction, and figuratively speaking, inserted their foot in my two-pack, I wouldn't be where I am today, right? And fast forward, in my career, I was a drill instructor, or as we say in the Navy, a recruit division commander. And one of the programs that I ran was called the PASS program. This program would take the worst recruits and put them in a 5-day, 40-hour course of remedial instruction, focused on character development, focused on self-reflection, self-evaluation, self-awareness, and assessing their values. Now, upon successfully graduating from this course, they would be reintegrated back into training. And 9 times out of 10, they would go from being the worst recruit in their previous division to actually the best recruit in their new division. In like manner, the USNA self-treat course would be awarded at adjudication by the DONT or DEFDONT on a case-by-case basis. This 10-day, 10-hour remedial course of instruction would focus on the same attributes and would be conducted in place of tours for those on restriction. So if they're on restriction for 30 days, the last 2 weeks would be this course in place of their tours. TREAT is also an acronym. It stands for Transformation Through Self-Reflection, Self-Evaluation, Self-Awareness, and Self-Training. So the participants would get more buy-in to this course because again, the facilitators would also be hand-selected and trained, but are also prior offenders. So they've been on restriction, they've served their time and have volunteered to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem, giving them more continued accountability and the participants more buy-in because they can relate to the person in front of the room. Some of the, for example, some of the outcomes would be recognizing unhealthy habits and temptations, examining personal motives, tendencies, and thought processes, seeking out mentors and coaches before making potentially poor decisions, and internalizing a purpose and pride in their professionalism and character development. Now, we are aware that there are some other initiatives already on the yard going in this direction, and it is our intent to align and collaborate and coordinate with those other entities. With that, that concludes our presentation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, the last presentation was you, Rob.
Here I
That's the
am.
lunch.
Hi.
Save the best for
Oh, no. But thank you for that. That's great. I'm Professor Richard Dillon. I'm from the History Department, and I'm going to echo what my colleagues here today have said, that much appreciation for the opportunity to learn from our leadership and ethics colleagues and think of ways to integrate it into the classroom. I'll be honest and say, I initially came here with a different project, and I sort of changed midstream, and sort of explain why. So I sought out this. I was excited about this opportunity as soon as you put the email out there. Sign up for the workshop, and I signed up because I was craving information about what goes on over in these courses. And I think for a lot of my colleagues, I don't think it's just the history department, but our biggest familiarity is it's a little block on the matrix when we're doing academic advising, and we're aware of it and we respect it, but it's sort of, we don't know much about it. And so I signed up for this workshop wanting to learn, and I've certainly, that's happened a lot this week. And so I changed my project, sort of inspired by these two slogans we kind of hear in life, right? You don't know what you don't know, but if you build it, they will come. So that's sort of, but you know, what is inspiring, what you know, where I went next. And also I was thinking about how do I share what I've learned? How do I integrate it in a way that would have the biggest impact? And so here, being a historian, I'm thinking about a very effective tactic from the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II, that if you want to take out, you know, a U-boat, you can go after it individually, or you can go after the supply cell, right, the milk cow. So my students are going to be my colleagues in the history department, so to speak. And being inspired, I realized we all have honor reps in all of the departments. And I have a wonderful Marine Corps officer, Bob Q, who's my honor rep, but he can't really translate what's going on beyond the honor situation. He's very busy with that. So I want to, you can sort of propose to create a new position for myself. My department chair doesn't know this yet. And, you know, ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And why wouldn't he support this? I want to establish and serve as what I've just sort of provisionally titled an LEL liaison. It would be a position within my department where I am working with the Stockdale Center and leadership, ethics, and law colleagues to kind of bring awareness, first of all, just awareness, and then translate what's going on over here for my colleagues in the history department. And so if others, you know, maybe that would serve as a model for other departments too, just as we have the honor rep program, kind of institutionalize that. Although with faculty, of course, this is a suggestion, not a command. So what would my learning outcomes be? I mean, what I'm envisioning actually is meeting with I want my faculty colleagues to be able to describe what's going on in leadership and ethics courses, in particular the core sequence, right? And to have familiarity with that beyond, oh yes, this is going to occur third class year, so let's make sure we schedule around that. I want them, if they wish, and I hope that will be the case, to be able to integrate leadership and ethics principles, concepts, sort of foundational knowledge, if you will,
terminology and themes in the history courses. I think history courses are an especially good place to do that because we can use examples. I teach naval and military history. There's just so many excellent examples where we could actually, I'm already having these discussions with students, but I could literally refer to the moral deliberation roadmap, which they are learning about in NE 203. And in that way, it's not kind of siloed, if you will. It shows sort of reinforcement of concepts, that kind of synergy that comes from saying, oh, I used this model in one context and look, it applies here as well. So that would be one specific example. But my colleagues don't know about that if I don't tell them and give them examples. And I would, of course, encourage, and my colleagues take very seriously the value of honor. So I think they'll really take to this. And then, of course, I want to have sort of I'm going to set up a Google Drive folder where they can find the information at all times. And of course, they can contact me. I would advertise myself as the rep. So just remember that information is available to them. So my lesson plan, so to speak, is I'm going to speak with colleagues over here. I have notes I've taken on everything here and really try to boil it down into sort of easy materials where my colleagues can look up, say, NE 203 and say, oh, here's what they're doing, foundational knowledge, core concepts. So they can literally just kind of plug that into their curriculum, whether it's core courses like HH 104, which is American Naval History, or the West in the World sequence, or upper level electives. And then I am going to do the homework to try to figure out where some of these core concepts, foundational knowledge, models of leadership, for example, that's one I would use personally. What are different models of leadership? I'm going to try to sort of distill all that and literally suggest to student faculty colleagues in particular who teach particular courses or have particular areas of expertise, hey, here's something that they talk about in NE 203. This might be, are you aware of it? It'd be a great asset to your course, perhaps. And also what you all are doing in the Stockdale Center in terms of podcasts, or when special speakers come in, if I'm letting people, bringing that to their awareness, they can use it. If they don't know about it, they can't use it. So timeline here, I'll be talking to you all, right? My colleagues over here. I think it's really key to develop what I'm just sort of calling materials. I'd put everything into one chart, minimizing everything, but materials, make it available early August, because that's when people are putting together syllabi. And send out an email, maybe give a workshop or talk in a meeting for sure, and raise awareness that these things are there, but they might want to include it into their syllabi. During the academic, and I'll do that again in the spring. Academic year, I'll keep in regular contact with my colleagues over here. Hey, do you have any upcoming events that you want me to inform my colleagues about? Any new courses that are coming up? And at the end of the year, how am I gonna, I'm just gonna, I think, float a Google form to all of my faculty colleagues in the history department, sort of a questionnaire about, do you feel like you know more about the content of the leadership and ethics courses, especially the sequence of core courses? Do you understand what they're accomplishing over there? Did you integrate any of it into your course? If so, which element and why, and how did it work out for you? And are you aware that, the shared Google Drive is over there and I'm over here as a resource? I'm very happy to connect you with folks over in leadership and ethics. So really, this will be what's going to sort of be going on. My goal is to have some materials ready for that critical period in August when people come back and they're finalizing their syllabi. But I don't want to talk more than 5 minutes. So that's where we are. They're very much a work in progress. So thank you very much.
I want to thank everyone. I love working at the Naval Academy. You can see some really motivated people here coming to work with everyday professionals who invested their time. Thank you for the senior leaders who came in here. It's really awesome. I'm someone who works both in Bancroft and over here, and I think this is one of these workshops that's wildly successful at kind of bringing those two things together and making those relationships. And I know from talking to past participants, that's really important that we continue to maintain the dialogue across cost centers and departments. So I'm really grateful for your investment of time in the relationships that you made. I've also seen a wildly successful outcome of this workshop is that we're adopting the moral language that everyone's using and everyone's taking responsibility to equip the midshipmen with that. So thank you again for hearing that, for emphasizing that, for promoting that to your peers. And then the last thing I'll say, just that I took away from this workshop before I turn it over to Dr. McCrease, is that there is really no inch of this yard where ethics and moral development isn't happening. And it's all of our responsibility to take that on board. It's not isolated, siloed over here in this building or in the chapel or anywhere else. That each and every one of us is responsible for the moral development and ethical leadership that these mids are getting. And so, again, take that responsibility seriously. And again, I appreciate you coming.
Great, thanks, thanks, Chapel. We have a few minutes for any thoughts from some of our guests or participants or our facilitators, please.
I have a question with regard to, you mentioned alumni were brought into this to, provide feedback or input. Was feedback given to them? Because one of the things you see many times is that what we do here is evolutionary. And what they did when they were here is what they remember and what they know. And then when they hear about things like this, they revert back to, well, when I was here, this is what we did. And so sometimes that feedback to them is as important as their feedback to us, because then they become disciples of what we're doing here and they can provide grassroots truth to other alumni who may not agree with everything that's going on at the institution.
Yeah, thanks, Chief Staff. I was maybe using alumni a little loosely in this sense. We're talking about alumni of the first 2 years who came back to participate, to share with the third cadre here what they did. We have shared what we do here with our alumni indirectly through the foundation, and we send our stewardship reports and updates to the foundation, and they disseminate to donors and alumni from there. Anything else? If I could maybe turn to, if I could put you on the spot here, Allison, one of the people who helped shape this. Any thoughts for you as you see it in its third evolution?
Yep. So thanks very much. What I see is this real understanding of the opportunities and broadening this. And so last year we brought in Commandant staff as well as NAAA members, and this year we really have a strong presence from the Commandant staff and understanding that it takes a community, but working together to make this happen. So congratulations to Stockdale Center for facilitating this, but even more importantly to the Commandant's Cost Center, to the Dean's Cost Center, the Provost Cost Center in encouraging, providing, and making that happen. And so I would say congratulations to everyone, and we really look to and hope that you're going to continue to draw upon these resources to make these effective changes. So from the top level, we're enabling. From the bottom level, we're making it.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Maybe Associate Provost Cermak, could I put you on the spot? You've been here from the very beginning as well.
Right, I participated in the workshop the first 2 years, doing the one-day portion of it. And it's a little humbling and very rewarding that this year I was replaced by prior members of the workshop. That's a success of this workshop, that those who were students in it are now able to take the content and bring it forward to the next group. So it's been very successful. That's exactly what we want, is for it to go out and integrate into all the different parts of the Naval Academy. We're already doing ethics and moral development, but to give us a structure so that we're doing consistently.
Okay, great, thanks. Let me see. Professor Mark McWilliams and Professor Shirley Lynn, are you here? They had to step out. Okay. Professor Doug Rao from Leadership Education and Development.
I don't think anybody believes that leadership and ethics is only something that happens in Police Hall, but I think sometimes people will say that. And I think this effort and what you hear from the folks who are participants is just more of a realization to make sure that we do take the principles that we're teaching in Moose Hall, in the core courses, and make them part of the training and education in Bancroft Hall, and to give our faculty on the academic side more tools to continue to emphasize this over and over and over. So I've greatly appreciated, especially the participation from others who are part of the academic, to come and just listen to us, and to ask us even to help with some of their putting together part of their curriculum. We're greatly appreciative of that.
Great. Professor Marcus Hedall, you're our subject matter expert for NE 203. Anything, any closing words here to add to the group?
I just want to thank all the participants. This is one of my favorite weeks of the year. It has been for the last 3 years. I learned a lot, and as I said to our participants, and I'll say to everybody that's here, when we teach ethics in our core class, we do it with civilians that are theoreticians and military practitioners, and we recognize how important that is for military practitioners to be talking about the importance of ethics. And I think that's even more true when you're talking about disciplines and you're talking about different cost centers. If we silo ethics and think it's just something that pointy-headed academics do, it's not useful. And so when we have engineers and data scientists and people in the hall talking about this and integrating it, I think that's just a great success story. And I've really enjoyed this program for the last 2 years. Thanks.
Maybe finally, Dr. Karen Sproles, the Director of Center for Teaching and Learning, you as well were here at the very foundation here. Any thoughts here after 3 years?
Well, I was just really struck. One of the goals of the Center for Teaching and Learning is to bring people together from across the yard. And that's one of the goals of this workshop as well. So it's wonderful to see that here. But what I was really struck with this time was how that goes now back across the 3 years that we've been doing it, bringing participants from the past back to work with our participants, and also the connections that we can now make between this year's final projects and previous year's projects. I can almost imagine, maybe we should do this creating a sort of map of the yard with little bright lights for where all of the ethical projects are going on. There's sometimes in the curriculum, sometimes in the hall. I think after a few more years, it will really glow.
That's great. This is a 1 week project. I'm going to turn it over here to Professor Celeste Raver Lunning, who would like to give a sneak preview and maybe a sales pitch for a program that lasts a much longer period of time, that again attempts to build bridges across different silos. Celeste, please.
Good morning, Celeste Raver Lunning, and I'm in the Stockdale Center as the Director of Influencer Development. And it was great. This was my first time because I came into the role in the end of January into the Stockdale Center. So it was my first time getting to sit through the ethics across the curriculum yard, and loved the presentations. I'm really excited about them, especially coming from the leadership department. One thing to let everybody know here, not just for yourselves, but to pass the message along. And I know I've reached out to different people in this room about it, but we do have the Stockdale Associate Fellows Program that is starting up again this fall. And please pass the word out to whether you're interested or to others. What that program is, it's a little different flavor than this, but still kind of the idea that you are getting to of getting more word out about what leadership is, what we're doing in Luce Hall, and how that trickles down to all of us in the various seats that we sit in. There's 3 kind of approaches to what we're doing in the Stockdale Associate Fellows program this fall, which is a little different than in prior cohorts. So there's 3 main sections. One is about leader development, where we'll focus in depth on what happens in our PLEAD leadership class, but at the level for the audience of faculty, staff, and coaches. So it'll be about leader development. The next module will be about leadership development, which is really focused on what we do in our second class leadership class, NL310. And again, targeted at our faculty, staff, and coaches, but helping everybody that's there understand what are we teaching in the classroom, how do you bring that to your sphere of influence. And the leadership development piece, because these are nuanced words that we use in the field of leadership, that's all about how do you understand climate? How do you understand culture? How do you develop climate and culture? How do you build a team? And the last piece, which is really the new piece of that program, and what I think of as my role, is about developing the leader developers. So we in this room are all leader developers, right? We're developing midshipmen. One of the things that I don't think we necessarily talk about is how do we develop ourselves to develop them? Not just how do we develop ourselves as leaders, how do we develop ourselves as leadership people, but how do we develop ourselves to develop the next level? So that's the third piece of that module. It will be a full academic year, so it'll start in September, it'll go through May. We'll meet for classroom about every other week on Thursdays during lunch period. If you're interested, what I'll do actually is for those in the room, kind of send out the syllabus. Feel free to pass it along. We will have a cohort of about 18 to 20, trying to keep it small so that we don't, we're able to have this discussions and kind of build one another up. And we did one cohort that was rather large and one cohort that was small in the past, in prior years, and we're going back to the smaller cohort.
Thanks. Any other closing comments from anyone else in the room?
I'll just say real quick that
Please.
this, we talk about the mission, moral, mental, physical. The moral is the top, and I talk about character above all else. And taking what is in loose and spreading it everywhere. I think when you interact with midshipmen, a lot of the discussions we have are about that character. And just we were down in Captain Johns and I were down in Protramid this week in Norfolk and seeing mids in action in the fleet. And it's the same thing. And so the reinforcement of that across every aspect that they see on the yard, then when they get to the fleet, I think it is absolutely critical. So this is mine. It makes me happy.
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, and I was going to leverage that because I think one of the critical things is that we have a tendency to focus on the 4,500 midshipmen that are here. We have a faculty staff that this is also going to highlight that we are part of the problem or part of the solution when it comes to ethical leadership. So some people need to be reminded every now and then. And when we talked about, chief and senior, we're talking about, people see things get done and no consequence for what they've done. There's some of that at the leadership level around the yard that we're trying to address as well. So this provides visibility to that, not just for the midshipmen, but for the entire, cadre that is the faculty staff of the Naval Academy. So I really appreciate this.
Thanks. Well, this brings to a close the 2023 Ethics Across the Curriculum and the Yard. Thanks again to our participants, our faculty, staff, and coaches, our facilitators, our donors who aren't here, the Novel family and the Robert and Mary Looker Foundation have provided funds that support 20 hours of faculty time for those faculty members and NAAA members who aren't otherwise on the payroll. Thanks very much on behalf of the Stockdale Center. We wish you back to the 2023 Stockdale. If I said 2023, I meant to. So we'll see you next year. Thanks.
One admin for the participants, we're going to do a hot wash, so we'll give you about 15 minutes to chit chat, network, and answer any questions, and then please be back in here about 11:15 for the hot wash.
Thanks.